You wake up, and instead of breakfast, lunch, and dinner, you eat exactly once. One meal, roughly the same size as everything you'd normally eat across the whole day, all condensed into a single sitting. Not for a week, not for a challenge, but every single day, indefinitely. What would actually happen to your body, your energy, and your daily life if you did this? At first, it sounds almost extreme, but also strangely appealing. No more meal planning 3 times a day, no more mid-afternoon slump from a heavy lunch, just one meal and you're done. But eating only once a day isn't simply a smaller version of your normal eating pattern squeezed into a different schedule. It fundamentally changes how your body manages energy, hunger, and blood sugar throughout every hour you're not eating. And those unseen hours turn out to matter more than most people expect. To understand why this matters, you need to understand what actually happens inside your body during the long stretch between meals. Researchers who study intermittent fasting and time-restricted eating have found that extended periods without food shift your body's primary fuel source, gradually moving from using recently eaten glucose toward burning stored fat for energy, a process that generally takes several hours to fully kick in. Eating just once a day means spending the vast majority of your waking hours in this fasted state, something your body is capable of adapting to, but not something it does instantly or without some noticeable transition period. Now imagine what your first week eating this way would actually feel like. By mid-morning, your stomach growls, and by early afternoon, that hunger often intensifies into something harder to ignore. Researchers who study hunger hormones have found that ghrelin, the hormone most associated with feelings of hunger, typically rises and falls in anticipation of your usual mealtimes, meaning your body has essentially been trained to expect food at certain hours based on years of habit. Skipping those expected mealtimes doesn't eliminate hunger. It just means confronting hunger signals your body still expects to be answered, at least until your ghrelin rhythm eventually adjusts to the new pattern. Here's where the science gets genuinely interesting. Researchers who study the timing of eating patterns have found that consuming a very large amount of food in a single sitting produces a significantly larger blood sugar spike than the same total calories spread across multiple smaller meals. In other words, eating one large meal doesn't just change when you eat. It changes how your body has to process that food, asking your pancreas to release a much larger, more concentrated burst of insulin than it would ever need to handle several smaller meals throughout the day. Now scale this up to something bigger, your actual energy levels throughout the day. Right now, most people's energy is at least partly stabilized by relatively steady blood glucose levels maintained through regular eating. Researchers who study glucose regulation have found that large swings in blood sugar, a spike followed by a subsequent drop, are often associated with corresponding swings in perceived energy and alertness. If you're eating once a day, you may experience a genuine post-meal energy boost, followed by hours of gradually declining energy as your body burns through that single meal's glucose supply, then eventually a shift toward the steadier, if lower intensity, energy associated with fat burning during the fasted hours that follow. This is where the twist comes in. You might expect eating less frequently to simply mean eating less overall, which sounds like an easy path to weight management. But researchers who study eating behavior have found that people who restrict their eating to a single very large meal often unconsciously compensate by eating significantly more at that one sitting than they realize, sometimes consuming close to their full daily caloric needs, but occasionally overshooting them substantially, simply because a single meal doesn't naturally trigger the same portion control cues that multiple smaller meals do throughout the day. Think about what this means for something as ordinary as your social life. Right now, meals are frequently social events, breakfast meetings, lunch with coworkers, dinner with family or friends. Sociologists who study eating patterns have found that shared meals play a significant role in maintaining social bonds and coordinating daily rhythms with the people around you. If your single meal doesn't align with when the people in your life are eating, you either eat alone repeatedly or find yourself sitting at social meals not eating, which can create a subtle but real social friction that has little to do with nutrition and everything to do with timing. Now widen the lens to something bigger. What if you sustained this pattern not for weeks, but for years? Long-term research on time-restricted eating patterns offers a useful, if still developing, picture. Researchers who study extended fasting windows have found some evidence that very restrictive eating windows may be associated with certain metabolic benefits, but also caution that much of the current research involves relatively short study periods, and long-term outcomes, especially for cardiovascular health, remain an active and somewhat contested area of ongoing research. In other words, the honest answer to what happens after years of eating this way is that scientists are still working it out, and the current evidence doesn't yet support strong long-term guarantees in either direction. Here's the twist most people don't expect. Eating one meal a day doesn't automatically mean eating a healthier or more nutritionally complete diet. Registered dietitians who study nutritional adequacy have found that condensing all your daily nutritional needs into a single meal can make it genuinely difficult to consistently include all necessary food groups, vitamins, and minerals, especially compared to spreading intake across multiple meals, where variety naturally accumulates throughout the day. Someone eating one meal a day isn't automatically eating better. They're simply facing a narrower, more demanding window in which to get everything nutritionally right. Let's slow down and look at the mechanics of this a little closer, because different systems in your body respond to this pattern in different ways. Consider your digestive system specifically. Right now, your gut is used to processing food in relatively predictable, moderate portions spread across the day. Researchers who study digestion have found that consuming an unusually large volume of food in one sitting can place significantly more demand on digestive capacity than the body is accustomed to, sometimes resulting in noticeable bloating, discomfort, or sluggishness in the hours immediately following that single large meal. This isn't necessarily harmful, but it is a genuine physical adjustment, one that many people find becomes more manageable over the first several weeks as the digestive system adapts to handling larger individual loads. Now think about something surprisingly practical: your sleep. Right now, most people finish eating several hours before bedtime, giving their body time to largely complete digestion before sleep begins. Researchers who study the connection between eating timing and sleep quality have found that eating a very large meal close to bedtime can sometimes interfere with sleep onset and quality, since active digestion competes with the physiological processes involved in falling and staying asleep. Depending on when your single meal falls in your schedule, this pattern could either have little effect on your sleep or become a recurring nightly disruption, depending entirely on the specific timing you choose. Now consider something even more relevant to daily function: your ability to concentrate during that first fasted stretch of the morning. Researchers who study cognition and fasting have found mixed results on this question. Some studies suggesting that mild fasting states can actually sharpen certain types of focus and alertness in the short term, while others find that hunger itself can become a distracting, attention-consuming signal that competes with whatever task you're trying to concentrate on. The honest picture here is genuinely individual. Some people report feeling sharper while fasted. Others report the opposite, and there isn't yet a single, universal answer that applies the same way to everyone. Now widen the lens one more time, back to something deeply personal: how this pattern interacts with exercise and physical activity. Right now, many people time their workouts around when they've recently eaten, relying on readily available glucose for higher intensity exercise. Researchers who study exercise performance in fasted states have found that performance in high-intensity activities can sometimes decline when attempted during extended fasting windows, while lower-intensity activities are often less affected. If your single meal falls late in the day, this could mean restructuring not just when you eat, but when and how intensely you're able to exercise, since your body's most readily available fuel source is only present for a narrow portion of each day. So what if you only ate one meal a day? You would not simply be eating less on a smaller schedule. You would be running a long-term experiment in metabolic adaptation, hormone regulation, and social coordination. One where the actual outcome depends heavily on what you eat during that single sitting, how well your body adjusts over time, and whether the rhythm of your single meal can realistically coexist with the people and schedules around you. Maybe the real question was never simply how many meals you eat in a day. Maybe it was always about whether the pattern you choose actually fits the body, the schedule, and the life you're trying to build it around. And for anyone considering a shift this significant, checking in with a doctor or registered dietitian beforehand is generally a reasonable step, since individual health circumstances can meaningfully change how a pattern like this actually plays out.